Welcome. Sorry about that little wrinkle there. You got to love technology, and we're trying to ensure that folks online have a equitable experience. So we're just, trying our best here. So this is I call the top 5 library research tips. I'm actually going to sneak in maybe 6 or 7, just because because it's hard to pick my favorites. And I just want to make sure that there's also time for you to share your tips, because oftentimes I'm removed from a lot of what might be happening on the ground, so to speak. And so I'd love for us to learn and share with each other. So let me just go to the next slide here. Okay. So, who am I? My name is Angie Gerard, and I'm a librarian whose office I have at the Murray Library. I'm actually a social sciences librarian, and so in the university library system, we have what are called liaison librarians, where we have different librarians assigned to different subject areas. And so my background is in the social sciences and information sciences. And so I'm the liaison librarian for the departments of psychology and political studies. And the reason I bring that up as well is that within your disciplines, there'll be a liaison librarian who's an expert in that subject area. So there's a biology librarian, a chemistry librarian, health sciences librarians, that kind of thing. And really, that is your go-to person for assistance that you might have with anything that we talk about today, or anything else related to, finding, evaluating, storing your research, research data management, if you're doing some different kinds of systematic reviews, that kind of thing. And so just know that the library and the librarians are there to help you. And we work throughout the summer, and, we're always helpful in terms of we're always, willing and able to help you all. So get to know who your liaison librarian is, because like I work with a lot of graduate students in political studies and graduate and psychology, and we often meet one-on-one in my office and really dig into their research. And I love that part of my job, and I know my colleagues do as well. So if you're never bothering us or anything, that's what we're here for. So please reach out. So a little bit of an icebreaker, just if folks want to contribute online too, if we could just go around and just introduce yourself, like your first name and what maybe department you're working in this summer, that would be great. And if you don't mind sharing, if you have any ideas for maybe where do you think the best patio is in Saskatoon for some outdoor dining or libations, we can send around our recommendations. So again, my name is Angie. Best patio in Saskatoon. I haven't been to a lot lately, but I think the Earl's patio is always kind of tried and true. So maybe we can start with you.
My name's NJ. I'm currently working in computer science department, but I'm kind of doing math stuff. So
Okay.
Yeah. And I think the bath patio would be Sunfair Brewery.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that one's awesome.
For sure. Great.
So computer science, working in both, the best patio at the Berry Barn.
Oh yeah, beautiful. Right on the riverbed. Awesome. Cool.
I'm Jackson. I'm working in the computer science department, mostly focusing on 3D reconstruction and plants. So I'm scanning and stuff. These two.
Awesome.
And that's one of the best patios in Saskatoon. I don't know if I could give you a best one. I haven't really ever been to any of them that I like. Most of them I've been to have been on 8th. And it's hard.
Oh, for sure, for sure. So avoid 8th Street for patios. Yes. Gotcha. Awesome.
Also,
for sure.
I'm Emily. I'm also working with the science club.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really know any.
Mm. No worries. Maybe we can get some ideas for sure. Go ahead.
My name's Lisa, and I'm with the Department of Chemical and Biological Engineering, but I'm doing more of an agriculture thing right now for research. And I actually don't know any of the, I haven't. I don't know, so I don't really have an opinion.
No worries, no worries.
I'm Olivia, I'm with mechanical engineering, but I also have a focus on agriculture.
Right.
I don't know if it's like the best patio spot.
Yeah.
But Liberty Kitchen, like.
Oh, yeah.
They
Yeah.
have the best patio.
Right. And in winter, it's kind of like enclosed too. So it's like a 3-season for sure. Awesome. Go ahead.
I'm Graham, I'm in paleontology, and I think the best patio is Luna Pizza and Wine.
Oh, yeah. It's small but mighty, right? For sure. Morgana, do you have any suggestions?
Evening all the time. It's not the best, but it's my favorite just because it's close to home, the Better Brother Brewery.
Mhm.
Local beer, yummy pizza from the neighbors.
And whereabouts is that one?
That's Second Street in City Park.
Gotcha.
And I'm Jordan Epp, I'm an undergraduate research coordinator. I hadn't been to, I don't even know if it's still called the Fire Hall, just off Broadway there,
Mm,
by Victoria School. I hadn't been there in a lot of years, and I didn't even realize they had a rooftop patio,
oh,
but they do, and it's really quite nice. It's
Oh.
lovely.
awesome. See, all these things put on our to-do list for the summer, for sure. Now that's helpful. Awesome. Okay, let's get started.
I think that clicker should work.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this session is not about like how to do like comprehensive searching or anything like that. It's really supposed to be a practical session in terms of like what are some tools or tips to help you be a productive or maybe a more productive or an effective in your research. And this again is just kind of a list of my kind of top ones, but there's plenty out there. But these are just ones that I thought I would share from what I find helpful when I'm working with students. But again, I want you to think about when we're going through these, maybe what are your, like maybe something that you're learning that's new, as well as at the end, maybe you can share some of the tips that you thought that you find are helpful with regards to being kind of a more productive or efficient researcher. So we'll go through these and hopefully some stuff will be new. If you have questions about any of the specific maybe software or tips or anything, we can dig into them either now or we can talk about them, you know, you can shoot me an email or that kind of thing, because we don't have time obviously to go into a lot of detail. It's more supposed to be kind of an overview of these are some tips, and I'm hoping that you might want to pick one of these up. Okay, so the first one is how to easily access your sources. And so when you're doing your research, obviously you're going to, and by research, I mean like your literature research, that kind of thing, not necessarily your hands-on research. But oftentimes you're going to be gathering a lot of different research sources, whether they're articles, conference proceedings, you know, think tank reports, depending on your research area, maybe government documents, that kind of thing. And oftentimes you might come across paywalls. And so paywalls obviously are things put up by publishers who are asking you to pay money to have access to their information. And if you ever come across a paywall, please do not pay. Do not pay. Information should be free, and we have many means in terms of ensuring that you, as a University of Saskatchewan member, have access to that free information. But there's a few things you can do to make that a lot easier for yourself in terms of that seamless access to that information. I gotta step away. This is confined. I feel like I'm in a cage there. Okay. I'm not sure how far I can walk away from this owl.
It'll follow you.
Okay, okay. Okay, so the first thing, have people changed their Google Scholar settings? Do people use Google Scholar? Maybe I should back up there. Somewhat? Okay, I find that Google Scholar is more popular than, let's say, some of our databases because it's easy, right? It's an easy search engine. It's, you know, a step up from Google in terms of the scholarly content, that kind of thing. But there's things that you can do to ensure that your settings are kind of set to ensure that you have that access to university material. And so you'll see on the right side of this screen there, it says get it at USask Library. And what you can do is you can go into your settings for Google Scholar. And I should say, is there a way to send the slides to the folks?
You can.
Okay, cool. So all the links will be on the slide, so you don't have to worry about that now. But all you have to do is change your Google settings to recognize, so it recognizes you as a University of Saskatchewan student. And anything the University Library has a subscription to, it'll say when you do your search and you look at your results, it'll say get it at USask Library. And then when you click that link, it'll just connect you to our subscription to that particular journal article or whatever it is. If you haven't set your settings, Google Scholar wouldn't know, obviously, that you're associated with the university, and so it wouldn't; those links wouldn't be there. And so it's just a way of ensuring that you have that seamless access to anything that we have a subscription to. A few other things that I like about Google Scholar is that you can see here under the site information, under the site link, they have it under each citation there. It just gives you a quick article citation, usually in, I think, APA MLA Chicago, maybe, that you can just grab, right? So oftentimes you're looking for a citation. Sometimes I don't feel like, typing it all out. So I'll just type it into Google Scholar, grab the citation, make sure it's, in the right citation format, and grab it from there. Another thing that's really helpful with Google Scholar, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is that oftentimes if you have what are called seed articles or on target articles, or sometimes called gold standard articles, and you want to see who has cited them, you can plug that article into Google Scholar and you can see who has cited it. So it tells me, for instance, not surprising because systematic reviews are very highly cited, but this has been cited by 359. And then you could click on that and you'd get a list of all those articles or references that have cited this particular systematic review. Another thing that's helpful is you can see it says all 11 versions in this one. Often, if you're looking for a free version of the article or an open access or preprint, if you click on all 11 versions, sometimes you might be able to find access to that article if, let's just say, the university library doesn't subscribe to it. So those are all the different kind of little details about Google Scholar that I really like. You can see when I did my search there, I did put systematic review in quotation marks. We just know that when you put things in quotation marks, it searches it as a phrase, and so your relevancy will just be a little bit higher there. Another option in terms of getting access to material that the university already has paid money to subscribe to is to install the Proxy Bookmarklet. And what this is just a little bookmarklet that you install in your browser, and there's information on how to do that. And that way, if you're just doing a regular search and you come across an article and it asks you to pay for it, you can click the Proxy Bookmarklet, and it goes through our easy proxy to see if we have access to that article. The only caveat with that is that let's just say you're on a publisher website like Taylor and Francis, and it says, no, you have to pay for this. And you click the Proxy Bookmarklet and it says, actually, no, we don't have it. Don't always take that word for it, because what it's basically saying is it's checking to see if we have access to that article through our Taylor and Francis subscription. But if we don't, we might have it through another subscription. So I always say, don't always believe it. It's quick. It's like that, clicking that. If we have access, great. But if we don't think that, oh, okay, we don't have access. We might have access through a lot of our different subscriptions. So that's the thing. We have a lot of content through a lot of different vendors and publishers and that kind of thing. And so don't ever hesitate to contact us in terms of getting access to it. And so if we don't have a subscription to what you're looking for, don't pay. So you can see that's example of something you might come across on the left there, where it's like, please pay $68, which is ridiculous. That just makes my blood boil. So don't ever pay for anything, please. Because what you can do is you can use our interlibrary loan service. And so interlibrary loan, or ILL, is a free service that we have for all students, faculty, staff. And what we do is we borrow or request that item from another library internationally. And so someone's got to have it. And so normally you just get a scan of the article. if it's, you know, only in print, let's say you're in the humanities and there's a book, we can also get the print as well. And so just know you don't ever want to pay for anything. We can always get access to it. You can either go directly to our interlibrary loan form and fill it out, or oftentimes it'll prompt you through different ways. So in the databases, it'll say request from another library. In USearch, that's USearch record on the right. You can see where the arrow is. It's like request this item from another library through our interlibrary loan service. You click that, it automatically populates the form. So at the end of the day, please don't pay for anything. We'll get it for you.
You're already paid.
Yes, a lot. So for sure. Okay, so you're getting all these sources. And now you have to figure out when you're looking at all these different, let's say, databases and websites and that kind of thing, how are you going to quickly evaluate what you're finding? And so oftentimes this kind of assessment markers of credibility, you need to kind of have quick, right? Because you're going through a ton of information and tons of sources. And so when you're looking at all these different sources that might come across your desk, what are some indicators that you guys use to kind of make that determination about, yes, this is, you know, something that I should be looking into, or no, this is kind of not so credible? What are some things?
Sorry, I just have a question from the chat.
Yes.
How long does it take to get sources from the interlibrary loan?
Usually it's quite quick. So I would say about, if it's something electronic, usually it's within like 48 hours. For sure. If it has to get mailed from Europe, it's going to be a little bit longer,
Fair
but
enough.
yeah, for sure. If it's electronic, it's pretty darn quick. Absolutely. Yeah. So what are some indicators that you guys use for when you're like looking at your sources and you're kind of determining, is, you know, is this a quality source? What are some quick things that just come?
Final and an abstract.
Right, so you're quickly reviewing the abstract yet to see if it's worthy, absolutely. Are there certain like beyond the content, but maybe like the container, so to speak, or like what are you looking at in terms of, is this a credible source? Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Who wrote it, right? Is this a authority on this, on the subject matter? What's their background? What's their academic affiliation? That kind of thing. Absolutely. Anything else?
I like taking a quick peek at the references,
Absolutely.
if there's a lot of references or like what type of references they are.
For sure, for sure. Or do they have references? Right, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And I was just seeing on like lately on the Google AI, the new how it's populating at the top, and you look at their references and a lot of them are like to Reddit, and I'm like, oh no. So yeah, so it's not only do they have references, but what are the quality of the references? Absolutely, for sure, for sure. So again, these are quick things, right? These aren't necessarily looking at like doing a deep analysis of the content yet. We'll get to that. But it's the idea, what are these quick things that you're looking for that you don't even maybe even think that you're looking at? But the idea of like who's publishing it, right? Is it an academic publisher? Is it peer reviewed? Who's the author? Do they have authority or credentials to be speaking about this particular area? Are there references? Is it written for a technical or a university scholarly audience, right? Those are quick things that you can just quickly look for. Oftentimes, well, I shouldn't say often, depending on your research area, I'm thinking more in the area that in the social sciences, where we're often looking at things like think tank reports or organizations reports, that kind of thing. And we have to be cognizant of the kind of information that's being published and who's publishing it. I always say there's not necessarily bad, well, I shouldn't say, there's often bad information, but it's more the idea of like, you know, digging a little bit deep in terms of, you know, what am I going to do with this source and is it a credible source? And so what you'll find, especially when you become more immersed in a discipline, is you're looking at different characteristics again for the information you might find online. And so for instance, when it's like, when you're coming across, let's just say a think tank report, the idea is you kind of stop and you think, okay, about this source, not necessarily the content, but who's producing it? Am I familiar with this, right? So for instance, after a while, I'll start to kind of develop my kind of shared library about these are kind of safe or credible sources like the New York Times, you know, Human Rights Watch, those kinds of things. And as you know, progress in your discipline, you'll know what those credible sources are. Another technique too is to, again, look at that source in terms of not the content, not what they're writing, but again, what are people saying about that source? And that's a technique called reading laterally. And it's the idea of you're opening up a new tab and you're saying, what are people saying about this source? Because if you spend a lot of time looking at what they're saying about themselves in the About Us or what their content is, they're not necessarily going to be like, oh yeah, we're a right-wing, you know, conspiracy theorist website, right? They're not going to say that. But if you open up a new tab and you Google about the organization, that'll be a little bit more telling in terms of what that source is all about. And then oftentimes you might find too that you're getting research or stories kind of secondhand, right? Or maybe third hand or fourth hand. And so often this is very popular in the media where they're like, you know, like if you're watching or reading something, they're like, research has shown that blah, blah, blah. And you're like, I don't know. So then you go to the original research article and you realize it's a lot more nuanced and complicated than that maybe reporter led on. And so it's the idea of always tracing those claims, that research, those quotes back to the original context when you can. And
The SIFT model. right?
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So Mike Caulfield developed a media literacy technique, I guess you'd say, called SIFT. And I just kind of took what I liked out of that one. But it's actually, there's an interesting study that was done about that reading laterally, where I think it was done at Cornell, and they had university students, faculty members, as well as like reporters, fact checkers, and they gave them a source, and they had to determine if that source was a credible source. And the instructors and the undergraduate students kind of failed miserably, and the fact checkers got it right in like 20 seconds. And the reason is that, and this is just human nature, not anything against but the instructors and the students were really reading into the source, right? As opposed to the fact checkers, they weren't looking at the story. They were saying, what about this organization? Is this a credible source? That kind of thing. They left it, they read laterally. So yeah, so it's just a technique that you can use and adopt yourself when you're new to an area and the sources within that area. Awesome. Okay, so I realize that the heading of this is cut off where that's kind of where a lot of the meat and potatoes is. But oftentimes, there's different techniques you want to do when you are kind of going through that mound of research, and you want to know what you should skim and scan, what you should read a little bit more deeply, and then when you move on to critically analyzing the content. And so this table, again, the slides will be provided to you. It talks about kind of when and how you do the initial kind of skimming versus scanning versus more engaged reading. And so I think that's helpful. It's also helpful if you have a specific research question in mind or research area, because oftentimes when you don't have a clear direction in terms of where your research is or what you're trying to find, you often go down a lot of different various rabbit holes. And so when you have a clear research question, and I also call them like research, like non-questions, where you're like, I'm not looking at this, right? It's tempting, but I'm not, you know, it's like you kind of have a way to kind of put on the blinder, so to speak, in terms of not getting distracted by all that exists on that particular topic. Okay. So the third tip I want to talk about was tracing your references. And so these are different techniques that you can use to grow your search, your references. And so oftentimes, depending on the amount of research that's published in your area, you might have a lot or you might not have a lot. It just really depends on how niche and novel your research is. And so oftentimes, you grow your research and your research references by finding more that are related to the ones that are like what I call on target or seed articles. And so there's this process called citation chasing or citation tracking, whatever you want to call it. And it's the idea of moving backwards and forwards using those on target or seed articles. And so, because oftentimes I'll meet with graduate students and they're like, this is a really great article and I want to find more like it, right? And so how do I find more like this? And so backwards searching is basically looking at the references in that particular on target article and seeing if you can grow your search by looking at other references that they've used, and then, you know, see if those are relevant to you. Of course, they're always going to be dated because, or not dated, but they're going to be older than the on target article. But those references you could plug into Google Scholar to see potentially other articles. And so forward searching is the idea of you can look and say who has cited this particular article. And so if there's a core article that is important, you can look at Google Scholar. And again, remember I said that cited article, you can, or that cited option, you can see who has cited that particular article.
On Thursday, there's gonna be a workshop on Zotero and Research Rabbit. And Research Rabbit is an AI tool that does this in like a visual way for you. To show you, so if you put in an article, it'll show you how all these other articles are cited and, oh, there you go. I'll just let it.
That's a good segue. No, for sure. No, that's good. Actually, let me just back up here.
Thursday.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so actually here, let me just go to that. Yeah, and so that's like the manual way of doing it, or just maybe not even just knowing that that's kind of what you're doing, right? You're going backwards and you're going forwards with that article.
And you need to know how to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Or else just knowing like that's what you're doing, right? Because sometimes when you're using software, you're like, what exactly is it doing? But there's tons of this citation tracking software that's out there. Has anyone used any of these? No? Okay, because these are just a few that I grabbed. But my colleague was telling me, like, she showed me her list and I was like, oh, wait, sometimes you get a list of like 20 and you're like, no, it's too much. So these are the ones that I'm familiar with. Although that Open Knowledge Maps is a newer one for me. It's more topic based versus citation based. It has topic bubble, they're like concept maps, so they have topics, bubbles, and then within it is individual citations. But yeah, these tools help basically automate this forward and backward process. And so this is just a screen capture from Research Rabbit, and it's a visualization where it shows you like the connections between articles that you put into it, and you can have different collections, and you can share your library. You also, there's a Zotero plugin, and so they sync together. And as Jordan mentioned, there's a session on Thursday that talks about using Zotero as well as Research Rabbit. So we don't have time to get into that today, but if that's something that interests you, please consider coming to that particular session. Any questions about kind of backward, forward searching or using these tools?
I did my master's degree without this.
Yes.
Now I'm doing my EdD with this, and by far
Yes.
prefer this.
Well, you always see like on TV when they're like solving a mystery or something, they have all those like sticky notes and like the red, like thread. That's what this is essentially, right? It's making those connections for you. And it's like, it shows relationships, it shows connections, it uncovers research that you wouldn't maybe find already because it's showing you who cited who. So yeah, and it's just visually, it presents it in a visual fashion. So for sure. So I think, and as I mentioned, there's so many different tools, so you can play with maybe 3 and see which one you like the best. Research Rabbit has been approved by the university, but it doesn't necessarily mean like it's the best one. It just is one that's kind of gone through a process to ensure that it's secure and private and that kind of thing. Which then goes to the another tip is the idea of keeping track of your stuff. And I say stuff because there's so much different types of things that you'll want to keep track of. One of them, of course, we just talked about was your references. So do folks here use like a citation manager like Zotero or EndNote or Mendeley? Okay, what do people use here?
I started using Mendeley in the list, but she's sort of.
Okay.
I was recommended Zotero in the biology course.
Perfect, okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, Mendeley is owned by Elsevier. Ugh. And so they're a commercial publisher, and they've been kind of hit and miss with Mendeley over the years, so I don't recommend it. I'll say that on record. Zotero is free, it's open source, so we love that. A lot of faculty members use EndNote. There's a free version of it. But depending on who you're working with, they might recommend different tools, but those are kind of like the big, I would say Zotero and EndNote are the pay and the free, and then Mendeley is, it is what it is.
Wanna compare, well, I think we've got a session on Mendeley later in the summer, so you can.
Yeah.
Come.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's just some faculty members will
Yes.
want you to use it
Yes.
if you're working with them, so it's a good to know it and to compare.
Absolutely.
Whatever, just to know, but
For sure.
It's good to compare them, just to know kind of what the two are doing differently.
Absolutely. And on the library website, we have a citation manager comparison chart.
Mhm.
And so you can see, and it's those three main ones that we have there. So Mendeley isn't all bad. It's just, again, you might have to change your practices depending on what your supervisor is using, but they all basically work the same. Essentially, they're an online library where you import all your references. So I always just think about it as a shared library that's online that you can access anywhere. You can get the references into it you can manually add it. That's a little painful, but normally you just import things from Google Scholar or the databases or a website. There's plugins that you can have that you can just easily import things, just so slick, right? Yeah, and so it's just an easy way of capturing all your references, and you can put them in folders. You can have a shared library with different research teams. It's slick. And then when you want to get the stuff out, when you want to export it, you can, again, there's widgets in Word, Google Docs, that kind of thing, that allow you to then import those citations while you're writing. And honestly, like, do people use it when they're writing? Have folks used it? Okay, slick, right? Because it's like you're writing, you're like, Hall & Oates said this, and then you click Zotero, you import the reference, it gives you an in-text citation, and then when you're done, you can then create a bibliography based on all your in-text citations. You can be like, I'm going to submit it to this journal, put it in APA. Oh, I got rejected. I got to submit it to this journal and it needs it in MLA, switch it over. So it's just so easy. And so I highly recommend spending like an hour of your life learning a citation management tool that you'll use literally, I don't want to say for the rest of your life, but for the foreseeable future. So it's not a waste of time at all. And so again, the Thursday session and the Mendeley session is later on this summer. So I highly recommend it. So that's like kind of keeping track of your references. Depending on where you are with your research, you want to make sure that you have a good communication with your supervisor in terms of the data that's being organized. And so are folks familiar with the phrase research data management, or RDM? Awesome. Okay. And so it's a big process in terms of how you're collecting your data, how you're documenting your data, like how you're naming it, how you're storing it, how you're sharing it, and how you're ultimately preserving it. And so with NSERC funding, as well as all tri-agency funding, is that is something that is mandated by the federal government in terms of having a process that's clear in terms of how you, as not you necessarily, but whoever is on that research team, how are they keeping track of their data. And so data management plans are a common thing nowadays. And essentially it's a document that's explaining how you're doing, or how you will be collecting, organizing, preserving, and sharing your data. And as noted there, DMPs are becoming a requirement for researchers when applying for tri-agency funding. And so that's something you might want to talk to your supervisor about in terms of if you're actually working with the data, or, like naming it or preserving it, what is the data management plan? And I'm assuming they would have shared that with you. There's certain.
We had a session on that earlier this
perfect.
summer, which is recorded on our YouTube
Perfect.
channel if you want to have a look at that whole workshop, because they went through lots of different great tools for that and
Absolutely.
the strategies for that and lots of good things.
For sure. Yeah, and all these links go, like for instance, that data management plan goes to the data management plan site on the library where it has the template and all that kind of stuff. Again, your supervisor would have probably had to do that already, but it's good just to kind of be in that headspace in terms of, as NSERC, researchers, this is something that you want to be aware of, and just know that this is something that's expected as tied to the funding. Another thing that's important to know about or to keep track of is if and how you are using AI in your research. And so the university has lots of different guidelines for teaching and learning with AI. There's also one for RSAW with regards to, guidelines for using AI. And I won't click on that link. You can look at it, but there's different things that you want to be aware of and cognizant of and have a conversation with your research team in terms of if you are using AI in the research project, what are some things you need to be aware of? Because at the end of the day, you and your research team are responsible for, the integrity, the truthfulness, the accuracy of the output. And so you just want to ensure that whatever you're or however you're using AI, if you are, that you're adhering to the different principles that are outlined in those guidelines. So they talk about responsibility, they talk about attending to equity and diversity issues that are prevalent in AI use. They talk about the importance of protecting data. And security. Security is a big thing, and also transparency. And so these are all things that you want to have these kind of conversations with your research team about, because, for instance, once you go to publish your study or the findings, oftentimes journals now are asking for AI disclosure statements. And so you have to be clear in terms of what software you used, what were the prompts, that kind of thing. And so it's the idea of like taking 12 steps back and be like, okay, how are we going to track this? Are we using it? How are we using it? Where are we tracking how we're using it? So it's just that idea of being prepared for that way when it comes to publication, there's no kind of surprises with regards to, oh, shoot, we didn't track, the prompts that we used or what have you. Or, did we inadvertently put, secure data into an AI tool that we shouldn't have. So are folks here using AI in their research with their members? Some? Yeah, okay. So it's just that idea of having conversations, right? Like nobody wants surprises. So just again, clear communication and keeping a record. I always just, I don't know, maybe it's the librarian in me, but it's like it's better to track and document everything. And if you need it in a year or two, great. And if you don't, oh well. It's like it's best that you have it, especially because you might not be working on this project maybe in like next year, and then when it comes to publishing, and then they don't have this information. So it's always good just to have a record of that. Yeah. Okay. And so another thing that it's the idea of being proactive is that the idea of establishing your research identity now as a researcher. And so you may have heard there was some controversy about the USask emails being discontinued a year after you graduate or convocate. And so there's a lot of kind of downstream impacts of that. And often as a researcher, when you're, let's say, a co-author or maybe the corresponding author on a paper, often, as we know, when you publish, like the publishing submission review, it's a long process, and you might lose access to your email by the time it comes to doing all these correspondence back and forth with the publisher. And so I always recommend students have their own professional email that they use outside of USask that they can use for correspondence or things that aren't necessarily tied to university business. And again, to secure that kind of professional identity and contact after you graduate. And so that's something I would recommend. And a professional email, not maybe an email handle that you used in high school that might have been a little catchy at the time, but maybe not as professional now. But anyway, another tool that is often used, and it's kind of now the industry standard, are ORCIDs. Has anyone heard of ORCIDs? Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool. Does anyone have an ORCID? Yeah, okay, easy to set up, honestly. I put my example there, of my ORCID page. The library has a guide on how to set it up. It's so easy. Basically, what it is it's a way of setting up your profile through ORCID, which stands for Open Researcher and Contributor ID. It's essentially giving yourself a DOI, right? And it's, again, as I mentioned, it's the industry standard. And it's expected, right? And so whenever you submit an article for publication, it often asks you for your ORCID ID, because that's what they want to use to often sync your research. And so it's a way of keeping all your research in one place. You can put your grants in there. You can put your conference presentations, your journal articles that got published, your education, your awards, that kind of thing. So it's just a way of having a one-stop shop for all your research and your research output. And as I mentioned, it's just something that is now just quite common, and journal publishers will ask for it, as well as granting agencies. And it doesn't take much time at all to set up. And I find that, like, when my most recent article, somehow it magically just got populated there, and I got a notification saying, is this accurate? Done. It was easy. So it's just a way of having that contact and that link that's not tied to your university. You can add your university as well as your other emails in that system. And so there's different ways that researchers can get a hold of you. Another popular resource, obviously, to know about is LinkedIn. The Career Services has a really great page on leveraging LinkedIn. And that's another place that you can use to build your research community, showcase your skills, that kind of thing. Add your ORCID information to there. Okay, last tip. How are we for time? Okay, not bad. Okay, so as I said, I thought there was 5, but I'm going with 6 because I can. And so another thing that, again, I'm trying to be like proactive, but it's the idea of sharing your research. And the idea of embracing open scholarship, open access, open science. And so it's something that I feel like if we talk about kind of with early career researchers, it's something that just becomes something that you just do, because that's just a new way of thinking. And so often the traditional kind of scholarship model is kind of closed, right? Closed practiced. Often as researchers, we don't really see kind of what goes on behind the curtain, so to speak, until basically the published article. But you miss out on a lot of the transparency and knowing kind of what happened to get to that final stage. And that's been, the scholarship model since the beginning of time. But over the years, especially with the advent of open access and open scholarship and open education, it's the idea of, ensuring that there's transparency, reproducibility, analysis, that we can look at different stages of the research process and have a better idea of what's going on in those different stages. Because when you're reading, let's say, the final article of a journal, the methods section might be a paragraph, right? Well, as a researcher, I want more, and often I can't tell, more about what was happened with those methods, or why did they decide to choose this versus this? Like, there's not a lot of transparency in that. And so the idea of open science or open scholarship is the idea of not just sharing your final product, but the idea of sharing and being transparent about the different decisions and showing your work, so to speak, throughout the process. And we could do a whole session on open science and open scholarship. And it's something that the federal government is getting behind in terms of open science. And I think, it's going to be more and more common. And so if we can embrace it now, I think it makes research all the more stronger. So I won't go into all the different ways to do that. If you want to chat more about it, I'd love to have that conversation. But it's just the idea of just thinking about how can we embrace and make your research open when applicable, because there's sometimes when it's not always ethical and safe to do so, but the more we can think about it.
And in fact, we did do a whole section on open science earlier this summer, again, on our website.
See, look at
on
that.
YouTube, if you wanna watch that
Mhm.
workshop as well.
Mhm. Awesome, great. And so, as I mentioned, the federal government is embracing open science, but for a long time, the big push was with open access. Everyone here knows about open access. I'm awesome. Okay, and so in past, there was the tri-agency funding body had anyone who received funding from one of the tri-agencies, they had to submit their finished product in a repository within 12 months of it being published. That policy is now being revised. It's expected out soon, but what I hear from on the ground is that it has to be put in a repository as soon as it's published. So it's going to go from 12 months to immediately. And so that's important for you as you know, people who are potentially on these NSERC grants, is the idea of just keeping that in mind when you're working with your researcher in terms of often they might be talking about, well, where should we publish, and what about some open access journals, or how do I go about submitting my content to the USAS institutional repository, which is called Harvest. And so we can help with all that, but just know that it's not something that's like, oh, I really should do this. It's more like mandated in a good way. So just know that that's something that as soon as we embrace open, you know, the sooner the better. But with regards to your research, there's lots of different opportunities for you to share, which, you know, I'm sure you all know about with regards to the symposium, the storytelling competition, USurge, which is the undergraduate research journal.
University of Saskatchewan.
Yeah, too many undergraduates there. Okay, thank you. Okay, so, and oftentimes people might be like, oh, I don't have a fully formed, you know, article for that journal yet. That's okay. We have these things called research snapshots. And those are like, kind of like what's going on in your research. So it doesn't have to be full-fledged articles at that stage. There's lots of different ways you can submit to that journal. But the idea is that, you know, there's an institutional repository here at USAS. It's called Harvest. And there's lots of different collections within Harvest, and there's a spot for undergraduate research. So some people might be like, oh, it's only for faculty research. Absolutely not. There is a collection specifically for undergraduate research. And so I mean that for not only maybe your summer projects, but also as you're doing your research throughout your undergrad degree, just know that there is a place to deposit that. And that's helpful because you get assigned a DOI. And so, for instance, all the conference posters from the symposium, they should be in Harvest, and then it gives you a DOI to point to, right? So you can tell potential employers, you know, your grandfather, hey, look, I'm in Harvest. So, and again, that's something you can add to your ORCID. So it's the idea of making your research findable and shareable to all that are there. Okay, so those are my kind of top tips. I'm hoping it's helpful. Do you all have some tips maybe that you want to share or would share with your peers? And maybe Morgana, if there's anyone online that wants to share anything, just maybe something that you find, like if there's a tool or a strategy or something that you do that makes your life easier in the lab or while you're doing research, that would be helpful to share. Even if it's small. Anything? No? Okay, okay. Well, that's affirming though, right? Because I'm like, this is what I think. I don't know. Okay, no worries. Think about it. You know, okay, and actually I threw in a seventh one there. Ask for help. Because as I said, like this is what librarians do, right? We do all this stuff all the time, and we help, you know, we're here to help like students, faculty, researchers, that kind of thing. And so call on us, you know, like that's what we're here to do. And we have We have specialists as well as liaison librarians. So we have an RDM specialist, we have an open scholarship specialist. And so even if it's not your liaison librarian, we have specialists in the library that can help out with that. Because sometimes, like for instance, if you're dealing with open access and they're like, oh, there's these article processing charges, but we might have a waiver, like it gets a little complicated. And so we can help navigate through that process because it's not always that straightforward. So
I think that's a really good one to keep in mind moving forward as well, is that ask for help, because at the University of Saskatchewan, we have a very large group of individuals whose jobs it is to accelerate research. And so, for example, like RASI, which is Research Acceleration and Strategic Initiatives, which is what SURE is a part of. And undergraduate research is an initiative within that. There's teams on that who are literally there to help researchers like develop their projects and develop their proposals and their grant writing, and to do pre-award help and post-award help and all those things. And so that's something that being part of the research culture of a university is something you get to leverage and something that you get to use. And I think there's even lots of faculty who are not leveraging that and are not necessarily getting their potential as a result of it, right? Like there's lots of help at the university, at the library, in those research services, career services. And that goes for undergraduate, graduate, and faculty sort of research help. The university loves helping researchers. It's something we put a lot of time and effort into because it's a U15 university and it's a big mandate for this university to be a research intensive place. So ask for help. There is way more help than you think there is out there for sure.
absolutely. And oftentimes it's like just finding that connection, because it's like I might not know who, or you might not know who, it might not be me, but I can connect you to who I know it is, you know? So oftentimes it's just asking the question, and then people know people, and then we make the connections. So for sure. So just ask for help. Yeah, we can, you know, figure it out together for sure. Yeah, okay. Well, was there anything, like, as you said, like there was, like, you basically knew a lot of the stuff. Was there anything, like, maybe was there a favorite thing that you guys were like, ooh, I'd like to learn more about that? No? Okay, no worries. I'll send the slides because a lot of them had links, because again, this was very kind of surface, right? Where it was just like, you know, we just talked about RDM, but there's a whole, you know, 1 hour session on it. And so it's just the idea of kind of planting these seeds about like, how do I make myself kind of more efficient in what I'm doing? And so it's the idea of like tracking what you're doing, you know, storing you're storing all your stuff in a place, making sure that when you're coming across all these articles, do you have access to them? Don't pay for them. You know, how do I kind of differentiate kind of the good stuff and the bad stuff? Just these like little tips that hopefully just almost become like muscle memory, where you don't even realize you're doing them. And so that's the idea, is that you're becoming a productive and efficient researcher by using these tools without even kind of knowing that it's making you a more effective and efficient researcher. So if you do have other tips, I'd love to hear them, just because this is from my perspective, but I'm removed from it. So if you have other tips that you think, hey, I think students should be aware of, you know, this cool tool, or I use this a lot, please let me know, just because, like I said, I'm a little bit removed from that. So, and I'm also in the social sciences, and I know it's different than perhaps in the sciences. So, okay, well, I think with that, that's it. Unless, Morgan, is there anything in the